Why, hello, everyone. How's it going? Glad you could join us again. We are just attaining our cruising altitude here on clandestine international airways, en route to Shambhala International Airport at an undisclosed location in the Himalayan mountains, or possibly the Himalayan. And as I've said before, if anyone listening to us has some idea of how that should be properly pronounced, please comment anywhere you might be listening to this. I've just turned off the seatbelt light and lit the smoking lamp. So any smoking you can do. We're just hitting our cruising altitude. Looks like clear flight ahead. There might be a little turbulence. And of course, I'm here with my co-pilot and electronics warfare officer, Roger Hansen, fabled in song and story. And I'm just going to switch on the Otto Matic pilot for a little while here. And we're going to continue our little journey. Roger, good to have you again tonight. How's it going with you?
It's going all right. Other than the mishaps we had when we first tried to get the stream going on, everything's been going pretty good. I do want to apologize to anybody out there. That is purely my fault. I should have been able to take care of the echo and everything you heard while we were setting up ahead of time. I completely messed that up. I apologize.
Oh.
But that won't be in the edited video.
Right. But this is warts and all, and people get a little glimpse of behind the scenes here as we were having a bit of a rough takeoff. But hey, we're cruising along now, and that's the main thing. And we used to have a saying on the old Quantum Gathering, this is the technical difficulty show. And unless we had a few technical difficulties, it really wouldn't be a show. In fact, I remember something, I play music, and we have a saying that the worse the rehearsal is, the better the performance. So, things get a little glitchy. That's all to the good sometimes. So has your weather improved where you are, Roger? It's been really cold for a lot of us lately, but I think things are warming up a little here and there.
Yeah, it started straightening up about, not today, but yesterday. It got really warmer, a lot warmer. And then today it actually got so warm that it rained a couple times. So
oh my.
It's really weird.
Well, a little rain will wash away some of the snow,
Yep.
So that's not a bad thing. We're actually getting more snow right now, but it is supposed to be getting up above freezing in the next couple of days. They even spoke of temperatures in excess of 35 degrees, which will be quite the change from the below zero nights and the single-digit days that we've been having here for some time. Of course, we are going into a grand solar minimum, or so I've been told, and this is a time of minimal sunspot activity, and this has often, in the historical record, been connected with prolonged cooling periods in the Earth's climate. So there is the thought that we are approaching a time of global cooling, and we are admittedly in an ice age right now. And so these are we're in a period of much cooler temperatures looked at from the vast history of the Earth in any event. So it doesn't take much to push us down into something a little colder. And I've been talking about this for years, and it's one of those things that I don't really necessarily like being proven right about. I'm not a big fan of the cold, but it does have certain advantages. You've lived in the South, haven't you, Raj?
Oh yeah, I've lived more in the South during my life than I have up here in the North, to be honest with you.
Oh, well, then that, when I lived in the South myself for a while, and if you lived in the North, one of the things you notice is that you have a lot of animal life that the warmer climate allows, like scorpions and alligators and things that, I don't like the cold, but then I think, well, there aren't any scorpions or alligators where I live. And these are nice things to avoid. So I think it's worth putting up with a little bit of winter to not have scorpions. I don't know about you.
Well, I mean, with me, I was okay with that when I was a little kid, but now that I'm older, I don't like the idea of alligators. They're just kind of creepy,
I knew somebody that lived down there, and they were always worried about walking their dog.
Oh yeah.
They didn't want their little dog to get at. And of course, the South is the only place I remember. I love, about Florida Man, right?
Now, I are you talking about the cryptid?
No, just the meme. Basically, it came from, if you go on a web search and you just type in the words Florida Man, you'll usually see something like, Florida Man. What was one I always liked? Florida Man has an alligator under his arm and is running through a Piggly Wiggly, chasing customers up and down the grocery store aisles. Only Florida Man would do something like that. So he's kind of like this weird superhero. One was Florida Man locks himself in somebody's house, stark naked, playing the organ, or something. Just weird stuff that Florida Man does. But yeah, try it sometime. Just Google Florida Man and see what kind of results come up. It's usually it's a Florida Man that's doing like all these weird things. Not always, but often enough that it's become something of a meme. So, oh my goodness. I don't think he's gonna get far in the ocean with a truck, but he's gonna try. He's gonna try. Well, weren't we talking once about water, which is our oldest symbol for chaos, for an undifferentiated state? Everything just smooth, which has this hypnotic force over us. Herman Melville used to say, take a path and 10 to 1 it'll lead you to water, and talk about how people are just drawn. So maybe this guy felt the magnetic pull of Mother Ocean. Maybe this was just something he had to obey. But of course he had to take his truck with him because he's Florida Man. He's just not really swimming. He's taking his truck with him, man. I'm taking my pickup.
Yeah. He said, "It's not my fault the truck don't serve. Man charged for driving pickup in the ocean on closed Florida beach." Just so, if anybody missed that, I'm going to say it again.
Oh my goodness!
That desire for water.
I'm wondering about the trucks that do serve. It's like lots of trucks serve. My truck doesn't serve. I mean, did he really think? Reminds me of the guy that jumped the drawbridge with his car. I think we were talking about that once. And of course, in the movies and on TV, you jump the drawbridge and then you land and you keep going. And this guy jumped the drawbridge. The car hit. The frame broke. All 4 tires popped out. He had a ruined car. It's just landed, stopped, skidded a little bit, just came to a dead stop. So it's not like it seems on TV. I remember, actually, I once saw a car explode when the gas tank caught. Car on fire, and it was nothing like in the films or movies.
Yeah.
At all. Just like a dull whoomp, and it really wasn't all that impressive. I mean, I wasn't very close to it, obviously, but. That was actually the cursed farm that I was working on. We went to this farm. I used to work in. I used to repair silo unloaders for a living. If you know what a silo unloader is.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You've had some experience on farm.
Yeah, I grew up on a dairy farm all the way up until I was about 13, 14 years old.
Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about then. But for our listeners, if you drive past the farm, and especially the dairy farm, we have a lot of dairy farms near where I live. Very often you'll see silos, and silos contain silage. And they're very popular with smaller mom and pop kind of farms. You don't see them as often now. Most guys are going over to bunkers. They're cheaper, and there's a lot of reasons. But silos contain silage, and they also have something called a silo unloader. And a silo unloader is a large machine that basically loads and unloads silos. And and they're always found on dairy farms, usually around here. And as I recall, cows eat, it was like half haylage, half cornage. So you'd feed them like 50-50. Was that what you were feeding your cows, Roger?
Well, it all depends on who you work for. Like a lot of people, when they do their feed, they like to mix it up. You have barley that a lot of people like to put into it too, as well as other ingredients. So it could be like a 40-20 mix. Sometimes it could be, you know, kind of it depends on who the person is that owns the dairy, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
And what the diet is that they want their cows to have. So it varies. And I have another update. Florida man claims he only drank at stoplights and not while driving.
Well, that makes it fine then.
Straight from the Florida man.
Oh, wow. But the story I was telling, we went to this farm once to work, and it was like a cloud hung over this place. And we went there, and our job was we were going to climb up the side of a silo and remove the big plastic tube that went up the side of the ladder. And we're climbing, I don't know, it's like a 60-70 foot silo, pretty typical concrete silo. So we're talking to the farmer, and he's telling stories about how, silos are usually very, very sturdy. A cylinder is probably the most stable structure. If you go past a farm, even like an old rundown farm, usually the silo will be the last thing standing. Even those old wooden silos will still be there when everything else has fallen into ruin. So I never worried about climbing a silo. It's like it's very firm. But then he was telling us how the entire ladder fell off of the ladder that you attach to the outside. And he was talking about his buddy was working right at the top, and the ladder fell off the silo. He dove into the silo. Fortunately, there was silage about 10 foot from the top, and he missed the silo unloader when he landed. This silo also had, he told us, the silo unloader, these are held up by a big cable. Actually, the cable apparently broke, which I'd never heard of, and landed on top of a guy. And again, he was very fortunate that there was soft silage under him, and like the auger didn't break his back or something, So I'm like, whoa, this is scary. So, and then it starts raining, which is never good to climb steel when it's raining. We're climbing up the steel ladder. It's slippery and this and that. We're trying to get this thing off. It actually slips out of our hands and breaks, which is not good. In the meantime, though, when we get there, we notice that there's a fire going on. He's got a fire out in the field, and he had been burning rubbish. And you're not supposed to do that in this state at that time, but it was a gray day, and it was kind of rainy. And like I said, it started raining after we got there, and he figured, well, nobody would see the smoke. But the trouble is, the fire got out of his control, and it was going towards where he had like a lot of hay baled up and wrapped up in plastic. They do that.
Yeah.
And it's getting, and he's like, I don't know if I call the fire department, I'm going to get in trouble. So maybe the rain will put it out, kind of deal. In the meantime, the fire, while we were there, was getting closer and closer to this old car that he had sitting there, which still had gasoline in the tank. This is the car explosion I saw. So, we're going through all this, and he's just standing there, and he looks like that guy in the comic books that has a storm cloud over his head, just like a Jonah, like a Jinx. He's like really depressed and doesn't know what to do. So we get this thing down. We're putting all our equipment away. We're getting into the truck, and suddenly the car explodes. It just goes whoop. And I say, let's get out of here. This place, I don't want this bad luck to rub off on you. It was like the curse from. I'd never heard of a ladder coming off the side of a silo unloader. I'd never heard of a silo unloader falling. I was like, there's a curse on this place or something, and I don't want to work here anymore. Let's get out of here, kind of deal. I have no idea whatever happened to that guy, but it was just the oddest place I'd ever been. Just so many negative vibes. Like, oh man, I was, and the ancient Greeks used to think like things like bad luck or catching. You can actually catch bad luck from people. So if like somebody is like really unlucky like that, you have to kind of avoid them, or else, whatever is tormenting them might decide to start tormenting you instead. Hey, this guy looks really good. Let's get this guy instead.
No, I went ahead and I pulled up the Wikipedia photos for silos, and I showed them on the stream so that everybody can see kind of what you were talking about. So, there is footage of silos on there, and I right now, like, I have the footage of what the bunker silo looks like,
Oh, the bunkers, yeah.
and
Yeah,
there's another.
silos.
Yeah, now the bunkers, like you were talking about, that one thing I want to also add is like it's much more precise. Like whenever I was talking about being able to, what percentage of grain you want to put into your feed,
Right.
those are really, really good. And those front loaders, that's what I usually call those. Those are front
Oh, little
loaders.
bobcats, like, yeah.
Yeah, those, it makes it a lot more accessible and faster to get the feed and
Oh, yeah.
stuff of that nature. So.
Yeah, you can have a more nuanced mix for your feed, and really, you're just digging a hole in the ground, lining it with concrete, and there you go. You just put your stuff in there. Um, Back when I was doing it, what year was that? That was a long time ago. Would have been in the 90s, 80s, 90s, probably 90s. I think a new silo unloader was going for about $9,000, and building the silo was about $9,000. So, as I recall, it was around an $18,000 investment in a silo. And if you were going to do a traditional, I worked for a guy that was a James Way, what's the word? Franchise. And just when I was leaving the job, they were merging with another silo unloader company called Starline, and they were becoming James Star, just because there was like less and less business. And one of the things I noticed was, because I was talking to these guys, and they were like, and I met a lot of farmers. I never met a lot of farmers before, and I discovered these guys were actually really bright. It takes a lot to be able to make a successful farm these days. Most of them have gone to like Cornell or some kind of agricultural college. They were smart cookies, and I was being told, well, there's fewer demand for silos because the farms are getting bigger. Bunkers make more sense for the larger farms. And I'm like, oh, the big agribusinesses are buying out the little farmers. And I was told, no, that's not really what's happening is, and I think we talked about this before, what's happening is as farmers got older and they wanted to retire, you're in your 70s and you just want to go to your condo, the kids were not picking up the farms. They sent the kids to college and they got degrees and they got good jobs, and they don't want to work 15, 16 hours a day sometimes running a farm, never getting a vacation. You can't take a vacation when you're a farmer, and when they first told me that, I'm like, but then it makes a lot of sense. How can you leave a farm? I mean, the whole place will fall apart. The animals need to be fed. You've got to do stuff every single day, and the kids didn't want to do it, so they would just sell the farm to somebody that wanted it. Right. Because you're getting in your 70s and you just can't do that anymore. And so it's really kind of sad in many ways to see these smaller farms disappearing. But here where I live in the state of New York, we have an enormous amount of dairy farms. So I remember once we had to, business I worked in was like in Western New York, and we had to go up. We had a job to do for somebody. It was, long story short, we basically had to drive up to Thousand Lakes, which is up in the northern north of there. So as we're driving for hours through the state, I'm like, there's a dairy farm, there's a dairy farm. And when you've driven for like hours past nothing but dairy farms, you realize how huge a dairy state that we actually are here. So it's really amazing the amount of milk and cheese that we produce. I'm sure that we rival Wisconsin when it comes to that. So.
Well, don't tell anybody from Wisconsin that, because those are fighting words.
I won't. We don't need that. Yeah.
The only thing they care about is their cheese.
I've heard that. And this is all, of course, samsara. You're wondering what I was going to talk about Buddhism.
Gotta slide it in there somewhere.
I'm like thinking, this doesn't sound very Buddhist at all. Well, everything is Buddhist if it's looked at the right way.
Well, and it's a full circle with you. Like we've had that conversation too. Whenever it comes to Buddhism, I've never had a conversation with you where it didn't come back to Buddhism at some point or another. You know what I mean? It's like ever. It's never happened.
Well, I found it such an amazingly useful tool.
Mm-hmm.
to understand what's going on in my life, what's going on in my mind, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Buddhism is, as I've often pointed out, a lot of it is just basic common sense, not really too complicated. In fact, some of it is very simple, but it's very difficult to do. Sometimes the simplest things are the most difficult. And a lot of Buddhism, I think, has to do, again, with a caveat, my ignorance of Buddhism is vast. I am open to correction from people that are more skilled and versed in Buddhism than I. Um, but to me, a lot of Buddhism has to do with very simple ideas that are very difficult to do, and looking at things that are very difficult to look at. And when the Buddha talks about how we look for happiness in the wrong places, like the song "Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places,"
Mm-hmm.
we look for happiness in all the wrong places, and it's not really our fault because we don't know anything else. This is our ignorance. We are simply ignorant of what's really going on. The people who taught us are similarly ignorant. There's nothing malicious about this. It's simply the kind of thought processes that we need to get through day-to-day life as householders, interacting in society, and things like that. But when you take things that are intrinsically impermanent and look for your happiness there, you will get happiness. That's not impossible to have happiness through these things, but it's never going to last. And as someone once said, I mean, with the body, we generally look for happiness through our bodies. If you go with the body can bring you a lot of interesting experiences. That was that novel, Jürgen, very good novel, Jürgen, where he says, you're only here on the earth for so long with this human body, which is capable of very curious and interesting experiences. But the body also is going to take you to aging, illness, and death. This is what comes with the body. And we tend to ignore that, especially when we're younger. And, I'm older now. I am now in my 62nd year, because it's been pointed out to me, when you celebrate a birthday and you're 61 years old, that means that, well, you've accomplished 61 years. Now you're in your 62nd year. And it's interesting to look back at how I thought about these things when I was in my 20s and 30s and even in my 40s. And the amount of time I spent ignoring things, this ignorance, and telling myself all sorts of lies, or at least telling myself all sorts of things that were extremely unlikely. One of the things they used to talk about a lot when I was younger, and they still talk about it, was the idea that we may one day attain to physical immortality. And this was going to be done through an increase in our technology. And there was a guy named Ben Bova, science fiction writer and also a science writer, very interesting guy. And he talked about the escalator to immortality. And the whole point of that was that if you were born, and he claimed his date was if you were born by 1950, up to anyone born at 1950 or later has a shot at this, because if you live long enough, they will discover technology that will keep you alive a little longer. And if you can live a little longer, then they'll invent more technology to keep you going a little longer after that. And you see where this is going. If you just take the steps, it's like Bugs Bunny building the bridge across the chasm. He just nails another board and climbs out on that board, and nails another board and climbs out on that board. And then you just hope that you don't start. But of course, then he starts ripping up the boards from the other end before he's reached the far side. So it's like, lowering yourself down at the end of a rope and then cutting the rope and then tying it to the bottom and trying to go down on your own. So you can tell yourself these things and you think, well, I never have to worry about these things. I never have to deal with them. I never have to cope with them. But as we get older, we see these things are more inevitable. And I think one of the things that happens is when we lose people close to us, when our friends and our family begin to die, which they will. And especially as we get older, we see people our age or even younger just passing on, not through accident necessarily, but simply illness, aging, and death. The thing that comes to all of us inevitably. And you get to a point at one time or another where you have to acknowledge this and reconcile yourself to these facts. And I remember talking to somebody about this in Buddhism, and they're like, I don't want to think about this stuff. I don't want to think about this stuff. I'll wait until I die to think about this stuff. In the meantime, I'm just going to have fun and that's, basically, what was the old saying? Through denial, I'm immortal. You can just, as long as you're always thinking that you're, because we all go on an assumption that we're not going to die. I mean, you can't just sit around, I'm going to die. If you just do that, you're just going to get depressed because you don't have any answer to that from the point of view of everything being centered on pleasures of the body, the things that you get out of being a human being in a human body, all the pleasures, all the things that we do. And we've talked about this before, Raj. We have so many things that we like to do. We gain a pleasure, then the pleasure's gone. And what's left is, well, very often regret that we don't have the pleasure, regret at some of the things we may have done in order to get the pleasure. And, it was like the day I looked and I realized every one of these empty bottles I had was like a $20 bill that's gone. Where is it now? It's gone. All I've got left is like some fat on my body and a worn out liver and, just more aging, more illness, which brings me closer to death. But if we can acknowledge that this is going to happen and get past the panic and start realizing this is just what happens, this is just normal, and a view of it as anything else is really the problem. The problem isn't aging, illness, and death. These go with the territory. Why do we age? Why do we become ill? Why do we die? Because we are born. It is the other side of the coin. It's inevitable. And it can relieve us, I think, of a lot of the anxiety. But of course, we have to get past the anxiety that this thought gives us in the first place. And I think that a lot of it simply has to do with the fact that we've been taught to ignore it. We've been taught by our society to ignore it. We've been taught by everyone around us to ignore it. It's not a fun thing. We want fun, we want to think about good things, and we use our minds to try to amuse ourselves. When we take on these, and I've talked before about, we spend most of our time taking on identities in imaginary worlds. It has nothing to do with what we're actually experiencing. And we try to create worlds in our own minds that are going to be amusing and fun, but they get out of control, and it's basically you're giving up your position of power, your driver's seat in your car, where you're aware of everything and you're here now and you're in the moment, but then your mind wanders off. Wouldn't it be cool if I did this, or if I had that, or if I wouldn't it be cool if I was like 40 years younger or 40 times richer? Wouldn't it be cool if this or that person liked me? Wouldn't it, all these things? And then you go into this little world and you're not here anymore, and everything else slides. But then you start, once you've surrendered that power, then you can go anywhere. Once you get out of your driver's seat and the car's just going around, who's going to jump in that seat? It's like, I'll take you somewhere fun. This would be cool. But then you suddenly think, but what if this happens? And if this happened, that would have to happen. And, it's true. The more you have, the more things you possess, the more, what's the word I'm groping for? The more, position you have in society. The higher you rise, the more you're looked up to, the more you're honored, the farther you can fall, and the more vulnerable you can become. So if you've got a bunch of stuff, you've got to worry that other people are going to take it. If you're suddenly in this great position, you've got to be worried about people's criticisms, and it's really, it's like, you have status and you have loss of status, right? You have gain of wealth, you have loss of wealth, you have health, you have illness. One never happens without the other. And as long as we're tied to, as I was saying earlier, the body, for example, you're going to be tied to these ups and downs and backs and forths, and it's ultimately not going to be satisfying. Ultimately, it's going to be unhappy. So, at the end of the day, really, we have to be here now and use this place to behave skillfully, behave intelligently, and basically try to make decisions for our long-term happiness. And we can get to a point where we see our long-term happiness is not to be found in these short-term pleasures. So yeah, that was pretty Buddhist, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was really Buddhist. That was intense. It went into a lot of the stuff that we were talking about before. Well, with the exception that, like me and you, we went into a lot about syncretism, which is kind of off of it. But in the end of it, we really came back to the actual, the precepts that you talk about a lot. You know what I mean? Like it really did. It's weird how it started out. It started out with a tree, and then it kind of came back around after we went in a lot of other directions. You know what I mean? Because I did notice that, like, it just kind of like it went back to where it began.
Right.
So, and like a lot of what you said there, it made me think of a lot of the research that I've actually been doing after our last talk, and it's really intense. Especially when it comes to the tree. I was wrong about one thing I want to say too. I was referring to it as tree worship, and from what I gathered here in the last 2 weeks, it's not actually tree worship. It's just about recognizing the tree as like a sacred container, you know what I mean, or like a spiritual truth. It's a representation.
Right.
Symbol.
Although there is tree worship, there's always been like animists who recognize that there are spiritual beings associated with trees or other natural objects, certainly.
And see, that's where that's the cool stuff for me. So I kind of, you know what I mean? I love talking about the Naga, and nobody will talk to me about the Naga. I love it.
Well, the Nagas are they're a kind of being. They're usually I've seen them represented as having snake tails. They're serpentine beings, and I believe they're associated with water a lot of the times. And there are certain Buddhist groups that have the Nagas being the keepers of certain doctrines that people were not ready for in the Buddha's time. So the Buddha entrusted them with this stuff so that 800 years later, somebody could pop up with a sutta and say, you see, this is an actual authentic sutta that the Nagas were hanging on to for a few hundred years because people were not ready for them. But, I think I've talked before about how it seems to me that when Buddhism comes into a culture, comes into a place, the people there are not going to drop all of their ideas about the supernatural, but they're going to look at them through a more Buddhist lens. And I don't think Buddhism ever came in and said, you have to stop believing in all this stuff and only believe in the Buddha. A lot of Buddhism doesn't really concern itself too much with what we in the West would consider quote unquote religious matters. I think I've heard it described as a path of liberation. And again, you've got something similar with Taoism, which is another path of liberation. Although there are Taoist temples, just as there are Buddhist temples, again, it's not. I think there's a different kind of an attitude there that we in the West don't have with our religion. Somebody pointed out that in a church, for example, traditionally, and churches in the West are based on the Roman basilica, which was a place where a Roman judge would sit, and it would be like a marketplace. So when you go to church, you've got like an altar at one end and a place, where the mass or whatever ceremony your particular denomination practices. and then you have like a pulpit or a lectern where the religious technician, the priest or minister or whatever, delivers a sermon, and you're all sitting facing in one direction, and the officiant is facing you. So you're there sitting down in your pew, and he's up there in the pulpit, and you're receiving your orders, right? He's telling you, you're there, you're listening, and you're learning, right? So you're being told it's this, and it's this kind of deal. And it's very structured, and it's very top down. And I believe this has to do with the Roman cultural norms that were absorbed and actually were part of the religion of Christianity as it grew up. As we know, what we know of today as the church was very influenced by its association with the Roman government. And indeed, it became part of the Roman government apparatus. And to this day, the church uses terms like diocese. Like a diocese is an old Roman tax district. Yeah. They've got the whole world organized as if it's all Roman provinces. So it's still the Roman Empire. There's still a Roman Empire, remnants of it out there, and it's the Roman Catholic Church. They even call themselves Roman, right?
Yeah.
So, but with these Eastern religions, Buddhism, Taoism, I mean, there's still that. Obviously, there's still authorities. You still listen to people that are higher up and are teaching and stuff like that. But I think it's less top down and more welling up from within. I mean, obviously, you've got instructions and you've got rules and you've got things you've got to do. But the Buddha very famously said, "Don't believe something just because somebody says it. You try it out, you test it, and then you have knowledge, not just belief." I mean, you can have a belief, and you can have an intelligent belief. You can say, this is a good working hypothesis. I like the sound of this. But then you have to internalize it. You have to do the work yourself and see what the results are. And this is a little different from do what you're told, say this prayer, perform this penance, do this pilgrimage or whatever, and whammo, presto, bang, it's done, it's taken care of. I think with these Eastern religions, I think some of the older Western teachings, and this includes Gnosticism, some kinds of Gnosticism, were more concerned with an inner experience that you could then correlate with the culture, the experience of the people around you, and in the matrix of that religion kind of deal. So I think that's a big difference between East and West that is breaking down a lot nowadays.
Well, it's like even with the whole concept of the tree when it comes to Buddhism, and when you were talking about how when the Greek and the Romans came to India, they wanted to start using statues and stuff, and it makes it makes you think about the whole concept of the tree as well. Because one thing that I've been finding out when it comes to what I've been reading on is like Dharma. When you talk about Dharma, it's profound first of all, but it's also formless.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not something it's not an object that you could hold or a word that you could define. It's an insight or an awakening. You know what I mean?
Right.
And with the symbolism of the tree, they treat it like they pointed out from what I've read, it's a sacred container or something that can hold or rebuild this formless reality. You know what I mean? So that the human mind can comprehend it. That to me sounds like kind of what you were talking about with statues and things like that. You know what I mean? The statue of Buddha, they wanted to make that symbol so that people could kind of relate to it. You know what I mean?
It concretizes it. Yeah. And the Greeks especially were really big on statues as part of their religious worship. And I think you can trace that to Julian James's ideas of the bicameral mind. According to Jamesian theory, when we had the bicameral mind, we would hear, and I guess anyone who's been listening to me has probably heard me go on about the bicameral theory of Julian James. But the idea that what we would today call audio-visual hallucinations, but which were at that time a functioning part of healthy human consciousness, you would actually hear voices coming from statues. Statues and images were there to help facilitate this mental experience. So, but on the other hand, it was not uniform. And there was a story, I don't know how true it was, when the Celts came down, and the Celts for the Greeks and Romans they were sort of like the noble savages. They were seen as like being more virtuous than the citified, Mediterranean basin peoples. Like the bodyguards of the German emperor, or the Roman emperors would be Germans because they couldn't trust Romans. But these brash barbarians, they were like, these noble savages that would never betray people like that. But when I think it was Brennus came down and invaded, and came to the I think it was a temple of Apollo, and he goes into the temple and he sees a statue and he just laughs. This is your god? It's no, that they would worship in like groves, just worship in the natural world without trying to create an artificial thing to worship. But and it's interesting with the tree, that was one of the emblems used by the early Buddhists for the presence of the Buddha. So you would have instead of a statue to represent the Buddha in like a rock carving or a painting or something, you would have an empty throne or an empty chair, or just simply the tree under which he had sat, symbolizing the Dhamma itself and his enlightenment rather than a cult of personality. In fact, I think it was really a conscious attempt. Oh, there goes a snowplow. I think it was a conscious attempt to avoid a cult of personality. And it really went against the grain for most religions of the time. Most of which were very iconic, including like most of the other Indian religions at the time. So I think when the Greek converts to Buddhism started making statues, I think it just they took it and ran with it because it really did fit in with the rest of the culture for people. So I think it was a brave attempt to avoid iconic, just this iconic representation, but it couldn't last. It couldn't last. And this also has to do with how when Buddhism moves, it not only changes the cultures around it, but the cultures also change the way Buddhism is perceived and change the allowable ways to express your Buddhism. But that doesn't make it any less Buddhist. But I have always preferred, they call it an aniconic, a non-iconic approach. In Navakavada, we tend to use the Dhamma wheel, the tree, the empty seat. I prefer these, and I think part of it is that I kind of grew up with an aniconic attitude, and we kind of have that in the West here with Protestantism. One of the big changes that Protestantism brought to the West was the destruction of icons, iconoclasm. These iconoclastic movements, and you're probably aware of your history where you would have the Protestants go into Catholic churches and destroy the statues of saints, destroy the paintings, because this was considered idol worship. You're worshiping idols, and the classic stark Protestant church of a plain unadorned cross, not a crucifixion scene, but simply a cross and a pulpit, and the minister possibly in a black robe, possibly not. And the whole idea to reduce this aspect of religious worship, but which I think is really, on the other hand, it can be a very important part of someone's religious experience, And of course, the Protestants were, I think, very drawn to the Old Testament. There's a lot of iconoclasm there. Technically, you're not supposed to make images of living things. The Muslims really took that far, some of them anyway. So yeah, I actually, though, I think because of the Protestant influence on our culture, I kind of grew up thinking, oh, why would you worship an image? How could you take that seriously when what you're worshiping is so much bigger than that? But I didn't realize until later how much energy and religious fervor that you can really focus on an image. So I think it can be a useful spiritual tool, but it also has the danger of, becoming a thing in itself. When you start just using it for magical thinking, there's I don't know if you know, there's like a tradition of, if you want to sell your house, you take a statue of Saint Joseph and then you bury it in your yard upside down.
Yeah.
You ever hear that?
Yeah.
Stuff like that, like your whole, and there's the old joke about the kid who wanted a bicycle, and he'd been told, well, if you pray, you will get what you pray for. Pray to Jesus, you'll get what you want. So he prays really hard to Jesus. Jesus, I want a bicycle. He prays. He doesn't get a bike. So he prays again. I want a bike. He prays for days, and finally he's fed up. So he goes into his house where they've got a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and he takes the statue from the table and he wraps it in paper and he puts it in a box and he ties up the box and he puts it in his closet and he puts clothes on top of it to hide it. And then he prays and he says, Jesus, if you ever want to see your mother again, give me a bicycle. And that's where obviously you've gone past the symbolic and you've moved into the literal idea that the statue itself has some kind of a magical reality.
Now, with me, where I got most of what you were saying there is from, believe it or not, it was from a book by William James. It was the variety of religious experiences, and he kind of goes through that, and he talks about the Puritans and how the United States, especially, was built off of Puritan ideas. And if you look at the way cities and towns are set up, okay, it's set up strictly on a Puritan ideal, like the courthouse and the jail and all of these civic centers are all located in the center of the town or the center of the city. Those are systems that were created by Puritans. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like our society is just saturated with Puritan ideology here in the United States. It's so saturated into our way of living that we're not even aware of it. He goes really deep into all of that, and I agree with that. With what you were saying. Now, the thing about the tree that I learned too was the whole concept of interconnectedness. And they called it dependent origination. I don't know if you've
Yes, dependent origination, or sometimes dependent co-arising. Dependent origination is it's a mind-blowing concept.
That's what I was saying before we started. I didn't realize how much we tapped into just by getting into this topic.
Yeah.
It's
well, trees, as I was saying before, they've always been a powerful symbol, always been a powerful emblem. And just that whole idea, to me, I remember just meditating on a tree one day many years ago and realizing that as much of it is reaching up to the sky is also reaching under the earth. And there's this other tree that I can't see that's pointing downwards. It's a beautiful metaphor for both worlds and a connection between the two. And I'm right now looking at the trees bare of leaves all around and looking at the branch system, and they're like roots reaching into the sky, which is really a kind of an amazing thing if you think about it. And then the leaves come out, and I remember I had this realization that came to me while I was meditating on a tree. And I suddenly said to myself, everything you need to learn about life, you can learn from a tree if you just meditate on it long enough.
Now, I've got a word I got to ask you if you know how to say it, because it just boggles me. It's one of those Buddhist words.
I'm not always good at pronunciation, but I will give it a try.
Okay, I'm going to try too, and I'll definitely mess it up, but it's pratytis. Pratyayasa Matapada.
No idea.
Pratitya Samatapada.
Huh.
It's a idea that it arises that all phenomena arise in dependence of other phenomena.
Yeah.
Nothing has an independent, permanent self.
Mm.
And then it says like the tree is a living diagram of the truth, basically. And it says like when this is, and then this arises, that arises, and then when this is not, and then it goes on to say this ceasing, that ceases. And that was weird because like they said that's basically a short verse that explains the entire doctrine in a nutshell. It just means that for anything to exist like that, a specific set of conditions, which is this, must be in place. So if the conditions are present, the result arises, and if the conditions are removed, the result ceases.
Yeah.
And then they go into saying that there's no first cause or uncaused creator God in this kind of view. There's only an infinite, beginningless web of interdependent causes and conditions. And that leads you into the middle way.
Yeah.
That is so cool, dude.
Yeah, I think you were using the Sanskrit term. What you're talking about is the dependent origination or dependent co-arising. In the Pali, it's, I don't know how to pronounce things very well. Padaka Samupada.
There you go.
And that's probably very poorly said. I tend to use the Pali terms more than the Sanskrit.
That sounds better.
Pali is the language of the original Buddhist writings, the earliest suttas. It is probably pretty close to what the language of the Buddha actually spoke, although there's, discussion about that. I think the Sanskrit came in because they started writing stuff down in Sanskrit because they thought it looked cooler. It's like how, these occultists write stuff down in Latin, even though they're not part of the Roman Empire, that, and like scientists love Latin. I remember the Linnaean way of like dividing up animal species. The Linnaean classification system was created by a guy named Carolus Linnaeus, right? His name was Carl von Linné, but he had to call himself Linnaeus. And I actually remember there was a conversation with someone, there was an ancient Roman named Linnaeus. I'm like, his name was Carl von Linné. He was not an ancient Roman, but he wanted to be. These guys don't want to be ancient Romans. And so I think they were putting like these Buddhist writings into Sanskrit because that was the highfalutin language of the time. And but yeah, dependent origination it's very, basically everything is dependent upon everything else. And there's a meditation you can do on that. It's not exactly a Buddhist meditation, but it's a meditation that I practiced, and it's mind blowing. The first time I did this, it really blew my mind. I mean, I was like, when you really let yourself get into it, and if you're meditating, and if you get yourself into a meditative state, you through your breath and you quiet your mind, and then you meditate on say a piece of furniture in your room that you're looking at. You just look at it like a chair or a table or anything, any object. A hammer. So you've got a hammer. You're looking at the hammer. Where'd the hammer come from? Well, it came from the store. Well, how'd it get to the store? Well, it had to be delivered there to the store. Now, already, there's a lot of things going on here. First of all, it's made out of wood. The wood had to be grown. Was the tree planted or not? Maybe it was planted deliberately, maybe it wasn't. So somebody had to cut down the tree, right? And the tree had to be processed until you had that handle. Now, to cut down the tree, you needed a saw or a hatchet. Who made that, right? What about the guy that did the cutting? He needed to have parents. He needed to have clothes. He needed to be fed. You see where this is going?
Yeah.
And the hammer itself, the metal in it, had to be mined. Who did the mining? How did the metal get created in the first place? Was it in the heart of a star? And when you try to figure out exactly where something came from, I was doing this, and it just, I don't know how else to describe it, but it was just this sudden like awareness that everything is connected to everything else, backwards and forwards and sideways in time. Yeah, it's mind blowing, and it is impossible to actually grasp every connection, every aspect. I believe the Buddha said something to the effect that if you try to understand this, your head will explode into like so many different pieces. I literally said that your head would explode. I think that was a little humor. The Buddha had a sense of humor. And they didn't have comic books or something, so you read this stuff, you just have this vision of something, their head blowing up. But yeah, everything is dependent upon everything else. That nothing exists in and of itself. And as I was saying last time, your connection to the sun is as intimate as your connection to your blood in your veins and your blood vessels, in your veins and arteries. You are just as dependent upon every physical aspect of our planet, all of which is fueled by the sun, and the sun itself is dependent upon the fact that it was created through the as our theory stands now, through the coalescence of different gases and stuff, until they reached enough pressure and density and temperature to like ignite. And although the sun does not burn, it is a plasma. That's a different state of matter. But anyway, so yeah, it's mind-blowing. It really is mind-blowing, and none of us are separate from anything. None of us are separate from anything.
That is so cool. Now, before you get going, I want to do some shout-outs for you, because you do have comments in your comment section from...
Hooray! Comments! Hello, everyone. Thank you for commenting. What comments do we have, Roger?
Now, Aliena Baby from Kick says... send you all the love, Valentine's Day, only 4 days away, and give you a whole bunch of smooches and candies and stuff in an emoji.
Oh, thank you.
Then Hirish also sent you an emoji with its little eyes bulging in and out and headphones. And
oh, cool.
I told them thanks for stopping by. And happy Valentine's Day to them too. And then Veterans Radio sent you 4 skull emojis. So I said thanks for stopping by there too. And I'm doing a thanks for stopping by to Hirish now, because I didn't see his little emoji between Aliena Babies and Veterans Radio. So I'm doing that now.
Oh. Well, thanks everybody for listening. I hope you're all enjoying yourselves. We always love to have any kind of a feedback. Emojis are great. I'm quite the emoji guy myself. In fact, I've sometimes kind of overdone the emojis sometimes, I think, but they're so delightful, and they communicate so much with so little, which is kind of cool. A lot of unspoken words come through emojis, which are really neat. Yeah, they're very subtle.
Now,
very nice.
Another thing that really stuck out to me, what you were talking about, was the whole thing about karma. And I believe that's something that it depends on where you're coming from and what you believe in, right? Because like with the tree, I've noticed a couple of comments where it talks about how it's represented like a tiny seed is the cause, and it sprouts into a massive tree, which would be the effect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the usual metaphor for it. It has to do with, they're like seeds.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about the idea of karma, karma is the Sanskrit, kama is the Pali. Mm-hmm. I've heard that Pali is kind of like Sanskrit, only with a lisp kind of deal. So karma, kama. Kama is something that, it's funny. I was just thinking about this not long ago, because I've talked to people about karma, and they say, oh, it's like you'll be punished if you do this, or it's my fault, I deserve this because I did this or that, and it's my karma catching up with me, or if I'm suffering, I deserve it, da 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 da. Karma doesn't have to, it's not punishment. There's no malice, there's no God called karma. I saw a bumper sticker once, karma saw that. It's not like there's this malicious, now I'm going to get you, you will be punished because you did this, and there's like a one-upmanship involved. I think of it in terms of, well, that hammer, getting back to that hammer. If you drop a hammer, either accidentally bump your hand, it's slippery, or you just drop it without looking, and your foot is underneath the hammer's going to land on your foot, and it's going to hurt. The hammer is not punishing your foot. The foot is not being punished for being underneath the hammer. There isn't like some kind of, it's simply cause and effect. And the point of karma is, and of course, karma means intention. Karma is action, and that includes the action of the mind. Your thoughts create karma. Karma is about how powerful your actions are. Every action, every thought, every action has a great deal of power. You are the owner of your action, the heir to your actions. You are defined by your actions. You are related to your actions. Every single action. There is no such thing as an unimportant action. There is no such thing as an unimportant decision that you make. There's no such thing as an unimportant thought. And so we have to be very aware of what we say and what we do and what we think. And it's no good for us to say, it doesn't matter if I do this, it doesn't matter if I, engage in this activity that we know we shouldn't do, but it doesn't matter. Yes, it does matter. Yes, it does matter. Even doing something a little unskillful, a little destructive to yourself, it doesn't matter. Builds up. It's like drops of water. In a little, there was something, I don't know if you saw on Minds. Let's see if I can find it here real quickly. I posted a quote that I picked up here, and I'm going to see if I can find it, and should be right here. Yeah, here we go. It's evil deeds seem to be sweet for the evildoer, as long as the evil has yet to ripen. But when the evil ripens, the evildoer sees the painful results of his evil deeds. Do not think lightly of evil, saying, it will not come back to me. Drop by drop is the water pot filled. Likewise, the fool gathering it little by little is filled with evil. So if we just do a little something, that's all right. Well, a little something, eventually it will corrode us. Eventually it will affect us. But the other half of it, though, is that these are seeds, and we don't have to water them. The Buddha was trying to teach us how to avoid the bad results of our karma. He wasn't asking, do you deserve to duck out on your karma? Maybe I shouldn't teach you this because, wow, you did that. Oh my goodness. Well, no, you don't need to. Not at all. It's not a question of us deserving or not deserving this, because from a Buddhist perspective, we've all been here so long. This universe, the previous universe, the universe before that. Okay, if we're still here, we've been here ever since the beginning of the multiverse. And so we all have done unimaginable evil. We've all suffered unimaginable evil. Okay, there's no way you can go back to find the beginning. It's that dependent origination thing again, only through time. You can't find a first unmoved mover. You can't find a first billiard ball. It's a lot more complicated than a pool game. It's like you say, more like a tree that's coming up simultaneously and all these things, and yet completely dependent upon every other bit. So when we have these seeds of karma, we don't have to water them. My saying of, I don't want to water my karma with wine, with alcohol. That is not a good thing to water your karma with, because the seeds will sprout that you don't want to see. Right? So you can nourish the seeds of good things you've done, and you don't have to nourish the seeds of the bad things you've done. And there was an interesting metaphor the Buddha used. I thought was very interesting, and it has to do with like salt and water. And if you have bad karma, if you've done these terrible things, or have bad karma in your life, it's like a piece of rock salt. If you put that big hunk of rock salt into a small glass of water, not going to be drinkable. It's going to be this horrible. If you drink it, you're going to throw up. It's going to be very unpleasant.
Right.
However, if you drop that piece of rock salt into a broad flowing river, you can drink from the river fine, because the river is so large and so pure that the salt doesn't affect it. In the same way, if you have made yourself spiritually expansive enough, if you've gotten past all of these things that keep you small and keep you focused and curled up and withered around your sins, then yeah, that salt is going to kill you or make you really, really sick. But if you've expanded yourself enough, they talk about one of the Buddhist virtues is generosity. That's one of the first things you learn as a Buddhist, is to be generous. Generosity is very important. And it's been pointed out that when we are generous, it makes us large, because I have enough to share with you. Even if I've only got a piece of bread, I can break that in half and I can give you some, and that makes me a giver. That makes me a large person. It gives me a feeling of plenty. I can help. I don't care how much money you have, if you're gripping it and you can't even give a little penny out because you're worried, well, then I'll have less. That is such a small world. That is such a small world. It's a world where you no matter how many material things you have, you never have enough. You're always poor, So with generosity, you can be wealthy with a piece of bread. But with greed, with a lack of generosity, you could be Elon Musk level wealthy and you're still a poor man. It reminds me of something Aristotle said. Aristotle gets a lot of flack sometimes, but he talked about, when he was talking about slavery, he said, some people, no matter what their situation, you can load them with chains, they will never be a slave. And there are other people, you can give them the highest office in the land, all this honor and power, they will always be a slave. They're a slave to their passions, they're a slave to their sins and their defilements. They're never truly free. They're miserable. And it comes from ourselves. It comes entirely from ourselves. It has nothing to do with the outside circumstances. Whether we're going to be that big, expansive, virtuous, and generous person with a piece of bread, or whether we're going to be this greedy little golem-like creature. Oh, my precious, mine, back, down, mine, kind of deal. This is a power we have. This is a power we have.
Now, with me, I like my whole how I see like Buddha's enlightenment himself. I see it as purely internal. It is more psychological, and it was a spiritual event. You know what I mean? And it happened in his mind.
Right.
And like okay, for example, like the last time we talked, we were talking about the Bodhi tree. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, without the Bodhi tree, the story would be, a man sat somewhere and became enlightened.
Right.
That's powerful, but it's also vague and it's hard to connect with. You know what I mean?
Right.
So a Bodhi tree provides, a locus, basically a specific point in time and space where this formless event occurred. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's kind of where I even see that. So like, and I found out too, like the Bodhi tree is actually so symbolic. They've got one tree that is supposed to be a descendant of the Bodhi tree where it was supposed to have happened, and they take the descendant trees and they send them off to different areas so that other people can go to it and look at it and say, this is right where it happened. You know what I mean? And
it's the same tree in a sense. So it's like that old saying about God is an intelligible sphere whose circumference is nowhere, whose center is everywhere. The Bodhi tree is everywhere. The enlightenment happened everywhere, wherever the tree grows.
Right.
That can become the axis mundi.
Right.
And yeah, I think that as humans, we need these symbols. And the Bodhi tree, the place where the Buddha, I mean, no matter where the Buddha gained his enlightenment, if it hadn't been under the, I believe the Latin name is Picus religiosa, it might have been under, a locust tree or an oak tree or something like that, or perhaps just in a house. No matter where the enlightenment would have happened, we look to the physical symbols, the physical reality around it to latch onto.
Right.
So and the tree itself, as we were talking about before, is a very ancient, very powerful symbol.
Right.
And trees also, and this goes also back and forth in time, because religious ascetics very often did meditate under trees, lived under trees, or even in trees, if they were big hollow trees sometimes. So yeah, no, that is a really cool idea, that where you can plant the Bodhi tree there and you have a little bit of the axis mundi, because the center of the universe is wherever you are. If the universe is infinite in extent, then the center is everywhere, if you can see it.
Right. And when you were talking, there's one thing that really stuck out to me, and it was like the quality of the seed, the soil, and the conditions determine the health of the tree.
And your karma, the quality of the karma, the quality of the earth. Some karma falls on rocks, some karma falls in soil that'll nourish it, and some seeds you don't want to grow, or you want them to sprout as late as possible, and others you want to encourage. You want to encourage the seeds that have been planted by your generosity, by your virtue, by your refraining from doing things. The seeds that are planted every time you think something good or do something good, something that you should do, and that you did it even though it was difficult. That's a good seed to plant. That's a seed you want to nourish. We were talking about precepts before: not killing, not stealing or lying, not cheating, not getting intoxicated. These are all very good seeds to plant. Even refraining from an action is an action. If you decide, I'm not going to do that bad thing, I've been in situations, we all have, where we've been tempted. I could do this. And then you realize that there is a greater pleasure, a greater honor, a greater feeling of goodness that comes from restraining yourself. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do what I know is right, even though it might not be the most fun thing or the most comfortable thing. It might even be something that might hurt me in the short term. But I'm going to do this because this is what I should do. And this is what we have to take joy in. This is what we have to refocus ourselves on. This is the pleasure that we should pursue, not the short-term pleasures of things that are just associated, like I was saying, with the body, which is fun, but it's going to change, it's going to die. But your goodness, the good things you do, that's permanent. That's always there. That's something that you will take to your next birth as well. And that's what you want to take with you, because you can also take things that are not so good with you. One of my favorite lines is the Buddha said, "Nothing anyone else says or does to you can send you to hell. You do that yourself."
Yeah.
That's something we all need to keep in mind.
Now, for me, whenever I was sobering up, that's something that really stuck out to me, because I used to rent from a room from a guy who had emphysema, and like every morning he would take his oxygen in the front room, and I would sit outside on the porch, and I would meditate under this acorn tree, and it was sitting out next to his driveway and stuff. And I remembered every time I did my meditation there, all the acorns, because it was in the springtime, all the acorns would just fall and they would bounce off the concrete.
Wow.
And they'd ricochet everywhere, and I just stayed underneath that tree because I loved to hear the sound of them ricocheting, and it was kind of cool.
Nice.
You know what I mean? That they were kind of bouncing everywhere, and they could have hit me too. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Nice.
So I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting.
Your tree is the oak tree. That's great.
but it gets even better because I'm sitting there, and because these acorns are falling from the tree and they're bouncing and cracking, blackbirds were flocking around. They would build a line, and they would form a straight line with one another, and they would walk under the acorn tree and pick up these acorns. And when they grabbed what they wanted, another bird would fly in and land and take their place.
Nice.
You know, and when I started thinking about this, that's what it stuck out to me there. You know, because it was an important time in my life whenever I was sobering up, and it reminded me of impermanence. You know, you know, because when you take a look at trees, okay, in impermanence, you know, the leaves, they fall, you know, branches grow, but the tree itself will eventually die. You know.
And the grow acorns. The acorns are supposed to be other trees, but they become food instead.
Right.
And the birds eat them, and then they leave, and other birds are there ready to come in, and the birds are going to die too. But they're going to give birth to other birds, and some of those acorns might become mighty oaks. That's the old saying: "Mighty oaks from tiny acorns grow." So that, you know, just the idea of a seed, of an acorn, of anything like that is fascinating. All of that potential is locked up in that tiny little object, and it's a perfect metaphor for karma, for our actions. There's so much potential locked up in even the smallest action. It doesn't mean it's necessarily going to manifest, but we have to be aware of that all the time. But having that, that's a hell of a place to do your meditation. That's wonderful, you know, because you've got that whole show going on in front of you. And it's more, though, than just having that show in front of you. You have to be in the state where you are observing it, meditating on it, thinking about it. You know, so you had a very nice opportunity there. Very nice opportunity.
It was probably one of the best places where I've ever done any meditation, to be honest with you. Like it was very, very eye-opening. You know what I mean? Because you're seeing nature take its course, and you're seeing these birds just working together. You know what I mean? It's like when one was done and flew away, another one just landed right down beside the other ones and just continued where he left off. You know, it's really interesting. So
well, Roger, we've been at this for almost an hour and a half now.
Oh yeah.
And my battery's dying.
Yeah, we better take care of.
Yeah, and you know, I would love to talk for another 3 or 4 hours, but I don't know how many listeners we would have. You know, I thought this was going to be about a 20-minute long thing. It was my, you know, when I think about making videos, my goal has always been to make videos between 10 and 20 minutes. I always thought that was like the ideal kind of video length. Mm-hmm. And when I first started doing videos, I have a lot of them over on my BitTube channel still. I did a lot of talks with my friend Panibasa. At that time, he was Panibasa Bhikkhu and was at that time an ordained monk. And we would talk like we're talking now, and we would talk for hours, you know, a couple, 2-3 hours, like nothing. And then I would take and I'd chop everything up into like 10-minute segments and I'd post them. But I find that when we're doing these live streams, 20 minutes simply isn't long enough. You got to keep talking because there's so many things to talk about. So yeah, when I'm like, oh geez, we've only been at this an hour and a half, you know, it's like, that's a little more than I really first intended, but it also goes to show how you never know how things are going to turn out. You have this idea in your head, well, we're going to do this, this, and this, but when it comes to it, there's an old saying, no plan survives contact with the enemy. I've always said, no plan survives contact with reality. And which goes back to the whole thing of we've got this world in our minds that we live in that has usually very little to do with the world that we're actually going to encounter and endure. I love that phrase, encounter and endure. Yeah. But that's what we do with life. We encounter things and we endure them, and we either endure them well or not so well. So, but I think here we are trying to encounter things and endure them well. and learn from them and become better people as a result. I think we're doing that.
I do too. I think you're doing a really good job with your show too, because it's just some of the stuff you've discussed, like tonight, man. It was mind blowing. I love hearing you talk about that stuff when you get real passionate about the things you say.
I'm not even sure what I'm going to say when I come out. I'm like, I have no idea. Roger will think of something.
Well, I mean, it's really good to get some feedback on this stuff too, because like I've told you even before you started doing the show, I mean, I've been fascinated about Buddhism for a long time, and just being able to ask you questions and get your feedback on that stuff is a really big deal for me. So
I'm glad to be able to provide some information. I wish I knew more about it. Again, this is just my take on it, and my ignorance of Buddhism is vast. But all I can do is pass on what I've learned and my ideas about it as I put them together. So really, we're all together on this spiritual journey I'm taking. I've never considered myself a teacher. At the best, perhaps a teaching assistant. But really, all I can do is share what I'm doing. And I was thinking about this. I think we were talking before when I was thinking about, well, geez, we talk about Buddhism. How can I talk about this stuff? What can I say? And I said to myself, well, I'll go to my precepts. One of my precepts is not to tell lies. I'm not going to tell any untruths. I'm going to be as truthful as I can. Admit what I don't know and talk about what I know, and give the caveats, as I said, that this is simply represents the current state of my knowledge and ignorance on the subject. The state changes as I do more research, as I talk to people, and I am very fortunate and blessed to have friends who are much more versed in Buddhism than I am, who've been very helpful guides. And of course, we have the writings, and there are some very good Dhamma teachers out there, who I think are teaching the Dhamma in accordance with the Dhamma. And that's not always the case with a lot of Buddhism. A lot of people are very interested in Buddhism. It's a fascinating subject. And as I've said before, when I first started studying it, unfortunately, I, like a lot of other people, came across a lot of stuff that's represented as Buddhist, but which I now consider not to be overly Buddhist, or at least not helpful for someone trying to get the nuts and bolts of what was being taught. And there's we've talked before about the Vajrayana and the Tibetan Buddhism, all the Mahayana schools, and they're very flashy, and they've got all these cool, miraculous space bodhisattvas and wrathful deities and all that kind of stuff. But when you get past that, you want to say, well, what the real nuts and bolts are your own mind, getting a hold of your own mind, thinking the thoughts you want to think, not thinking the thoughts you don't want to think, and being able to look at things like aging, illness, and death square in the face and not be overwhelmed by them, by saying, yeah, this is just the way it is. I'm not going to be a child anymore and cry because I can't have a fifth, serving of cake, because it's physically impossible for me to eat that many servings of cake. Right? Please, we're going to have to use this. You'd be like the Romans of the vomitoriums. They eat so much and they'd vomit just so they could eat more. It's really useless.
I mean, I'm 52, but I'm going to tell you what, I can eat like you wouldn't believe, and I'm skinny. Yeah.
Oh, you're fortunate. You're fortunate.
But
I know people like that. They can eat whatever and they stay thin and trim.
My family.
I look at a donut, I put on 3 pounds.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. My family are so jealous of me because they're bigger and I can out eat them and I gain nothing.
Well, you burn it all off with your intellectual activity, your research. You're doing all these videos and all this editing and stuff. So that's probably burning up a lot of it. It's your passion for the truth.
And coffee.
And coffee. That actually helps a lot too.
Yeah.
Well, I do see we're getting a signal from the beacon at Shambhala International Airport. I see the signal lights have been lit on the side of the undisclosed mountain in the Himalayan or possibly the Himalayan range. And yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to switch off the smoking lamp. The stewards will be by to collect your hash pipes, papers, and other paraphernalia here in a moment. The seatbelt light's going to go on. Please put your seat in an upright position. Replace the tray in front of you. And we're going to start circling and making our final approach to Shambhala International Airport. Switching off automatic pilot. This is your pilot, Otto Excelsior, here with our co-pilot and Electronics Warfare Officer Roger Hansen, who's been handling all of the countermeasures that you don't always hear this while we're flying along, but you'd be surprised at the interference and things that some of these places we fly over try to shoot up at us. But they haven't got us yet, thanks to Roger's good work. So before we go, let's give people our socials. Rogers, why don't you start?
Well, you can find me at the Wonderful World of Weirdness on Discord, as well as Gaming with Infamous. That's my gaming channel. But if you're interested in stuff of this nature, you want to check me out at the Wonderful World of Weirdness. I'm also on Teams. You can find me in my community, which is Rogers Hangout. Besides that, I am on minds.com at Roger_Hansen, where I have another group there called Strange Stories that has a YouTube channel that goes along with it called Strange Stories. And also the Wonderful World of Weirdness is on YouTube as well as on Rumble. What else? Oh, yes, and we are also in Elements Matrix at what is that?
Imaginarium.
The Imaginarium, yeah.
Yeah, Infinite Imaginarium.
Infinite Imaginarium. So you can check me out there as well. And I do have a hangout there at Rogers Hangout at on there as well. But that's it. That's all I got. I'm trying to cut down on all that stuff.
You can check out my website, navakavada.org. That's NAVAKAVADA.org. It's spelled just like it sounds. And actually, we have revamped the website a little bit, and we hope to do that a little more, little updates, getting rid of some dead links and stuff like that. I'm also on minds.com, Otto X or Otto Excelsior. You can look for me there. And actually, you will find me very often at Rogers Hangout there that he was mentioning on Teams. So yeah, you might find me there. And otherwise, you might run into me at the store or send me a messenger pigeon or something like that. All right, the control tower is contacting me. We better cut this off. But thanks everyone for flying with us today on Clandestine International Airlines. And we hope to see you next time. Thanks very much, everyone. And thanks especially for the people commenting. We really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. And hopefully we'll see you next week.